This is Lama Tantrapa. Welcome to Qigong coaching clinic about anger. And we're not going to do the regular anger management like one would think when talking about the subject of anger. We are going to explore how to work with anger from point of view of Qigong coaching and using energy awareness, and also develop greater ability to transform, not only get rid of anger, but to transmute it into something more usable and perhaps more productive. Another thing that we're also going to do is we are going to work with our physical bodies. That's right. The physical body can and should be used to work with anger, as well as any other emotional state. Why? Because your mind can lie. Your mind can deceive you or try to pretend like what's happening is not really happening. The body, on the other hand, never lies. And what you can do is you can use your physical body to actually achieve much greater integration of all the different aspects of your being into a more harmonious and more constructive way. And that's something that we, of course, continue exploring through our Qigong coaching programs that we're going to be discussing today as well. But before we go into that, let me just thank you for taking the time to participate in our Qigong coaching clinic, because obviously it's important to you. Obviously you feel like this is something that could improve the quality of your life or the quality of life of other people around you. So this is something that I will do my best to help you with. Now, before we go much further into this exploration today, let me ask you to do one thing. Please put in the chat the reason why you decided to explore the subject of anger today. Is this something personal, something that you are dealing with, or maybe something that you see around you and want to learn how to deal with the anger of other people? Or maybe some other reason that perhaps I don't know about and would like to know about. So please take your time to put into the chat whatever the reasons might be that brought you here today. When I get angry, it's usually fast and I feel badly afterwards. Oh, that's a very astute observation, Marcia. Fast and furious. I know that it can be intense, and at the same time also it can be somewhat debilitating. That's probably why you feel badly afterwards. Oh yeah, that's the word debilitating. So that's exactly what I was thinking. It can be an emotional state that actually could cause havoc in health. It can cause turmoil in relationships. It can destroy communications and basically cause a lot of grief. So we learn how to transform the energy of anger into something more productive, and hopefully we'll be able to benefit from it instead of being debilitated by it. And here's some more coming. Would you like to know how to deal with anger to get my point across without getting angry? Excellent. Practicing consistently to create detachment from strong emotions like anger. Well, and detachment is something that obviously we will look into today, because if we are attached to our emotions, it actually means that we are attached to certain values. And we'll go deeper into it in just a minute. Now let me see what other reasons come up. I'm curious about this coaching session. Didn't know it was specifically about dealing with anger. However, I get angry when I can't control a situation. Very well, Carla. That's an astute observation as well. Controlling situation makes you feel more in charge. When things get out of control, things may cause anger. That's understandable. And at the same time, it may not be the most productive way to deal with the situations that are getting out of control. So we're going to look into that. And Barbara Lynn says, didn't know anger was the issue today. I just wanted to hear you talk. Very rarely get angry, so I guess dealing with other people's anger. Well, when you're enlightened, you don't get angry very often. However, it's possible to get angry even when you are enlightened. And at the same time, enlightenment doesn't mean that you are completely cool as a cucumber all the time. As a matter of fact, it means you are living a life at the fullest, which means you tap into all types of energetic states and resources that you have in your life, which may also include the energy states and resources associated with emotions such as anger. So there is nothing wrong with it. Let's not put a label that's bad and should be banished and never experienced. We just simply want to make sure that we don't succumb to the debilitating aspects of what anger can lead to. And also, I will be talking today about how anger may blind you, may interfere with your ability to connect the dots, connect the cause and effect. And that, of course, may lead to making decisions that would be regrettable. And when we're angry and we make regrettable decisions, obviously we set in motion the type of karma that probably we wouldn't want to have. Didn't know anger was the issue today. I'd like to know how anger could be used as an ally. Well, thank you, Sean. That's a brilliant question. And we'll definitely play with the idea of anger as the ally today, because it can and should be used as such. And Stefan says, I find that I can help manage my anger when I try to look at other person's view. But this is a challenge. Absolutely. And this is also one of the ways that we learn how to overcome our anger. So thank you for bringing it up, Stefan. This is definitely one of the steps that we're going to be exploring today. And Terry says that I was angry and was trying so hard not to show it, trying to look like I'm calm on the outside, but then the toll it takes. I won't take a pill to calm myself. Well, and some people take a pill, some people smoke a joint, some people drink alcohol. Basically, all kinds of people find ways to medicate themselves to tone down the intensity of the emotional disturbance caused by anger. Now, we can use anger as an ally, yes, but there is a toll to pay. There is a certain taxing effect that anger has on our physical bodies and on our karma. Basically, any decisions that we make in an angry state can lead to some karmic repercussions that we would probably not want to have otherwise. If we are in an angry state, it also puts certain strain on the physical body. What kind of strain am I talking about? I'm talking about actual physical tension. Let me demonstrate. I'm going to get up on my feet. And the physical condition we call holding pattern associated with anger probably looks kind of like this. Do I look a little angry or perturbed? Hell yeah, I can rip somebody's head off. Now, I'm not going into rage right now, but I can certainly demonstrate how anger can lead to a holding pattern. And this is what we call holding forth. Why do we call it holding forth? Because it's like there's energy flowing forward in relation to the center of your body, the center of your energy field. And your physical body actually gets kind of pushed off center, the center of its own energy field. Now imagine that your physical body does not occupy the center of its own energy field, aura or Wei Qi. Now that's going to be some kind of energetic imbalance or physical imbalance. Because, for example, to hold forth, you actually have to bring weight closer to the toes or the balls of your feet. And that will require tension in your calves. Because if you don't have tension in your calves, you'll fall over forward on your face. that's not the only place where there's going to be tension when you hold forth. Where else do you think would be tension in your body if you hold yourself kind of like this? There's going to be tension in the lower back, and especially in the upper back. The upper back tension is also associated with tension in the trapezius and the rhomboids, pulling the shoulders back, kind of sticking the chest out. When the shoulders go back in relation to the center of the body, something else goes forward. That's your head. So the head juts forward in relation to the shoulders. It's all relative, right? When the head juts forward, there's going to be tension in the back of the neck muscles. Why? Well, because the bones of the cervical spine, the vertebra of the cervical spine, that ideally would support the weight of your head, which is pretty heavy. In most people's cases, it's the weight of a heavy bowling ball, 12, 13 pounds, depending on how much hair you have, how many gold teeth you have. That basically is a pretty hefty weight. And the thickness of the cervical vertebra is about the thickness of a fingertip. So imagine balancing a bowling ball on your fingertip. That would be quite a challenge. Now imagine that your finger is not upright and vertical, but it's slightly slanted forward like this. Now that's going to be challenging a lot more, because now the bone structure of the finger is not supporting the weight of the bowling ball on top of it. You have to use the muscular tension to compensate for a lack of structural integrity. When you have muscular tension, it eventually leads to chronic tension. That's why people who are angry often get pain in the neck. Proverbial pain in the neck that they can often point the finger at others and say, he or she is the pain in my neck. But anger is not what is done to us. Anger is what we experience from within. Now we will look into how the anger arises, and we'll also see how we can address the root causes of it today. And this is something remarkable, because I don't know many other people who actually teach about this. So this is going to be a really neat exploration for you to dive into, and perhaps also help other people in your life to resolve such issues as anger. The comments that you put into chat, I can see them. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to post it. And if you have a desire to actually occupy the hot seat, feel free to request the opportunity to be invited to occupy the hot seat. What we're going to look at first is the reasons why people get angry. You know, we need to address the root causes rather than just try to mitigate the issue. You know, if you try to mitigate the issue basically using all kinds of anger management, it simply sweeps it under the rug. So you can pretend to not be angry, you can breathe nicely and deeply to try to calm yourself down. You can count from 1 to 100, you can release tension in your body. It's all superficial. It's just trying to suppress the symptoms. The reasons why anger is there are not being addressed when you're just trying to manage it at a superficial level. And that means that anger will either come back or it will fester. You know what happens when anger festers? Like you sweep it under the rug, pretend like it's not there. And what happens then? It blows the lid, or it erupts, or it causes all kinds of troubles. And that's basically what we recognize is the reason why we want to really address the root causes of anger. Because when anger blows out of proportions or boils over, so to speak, that's when it causes the most severe karmic repercussions. And we would probably want to avoid those. So what do we do in order to address the root causes of anger? we need to understand how we get angry and why. In my humble opinion, most people get angry for the main reason why most people get angry is because one or more of their high priority values is compromised or violated. Now, let me repeat it again. In my humble opinion, for most people, anger arises when one or more of their high priority values is compromised or violated. What happens when your high priority values is compromised? Well, first, there is a certain degree of alertness and perhaps defensiveness. Like, wait a moment, that thing is very important to me. Whatever that thing may be. Maybe something you love. For example, if your child is under a threat, well, you probably will put the hat of mama bear very quickly and start defending your child. If your country is under a threat, probably you will put a patriot hero hat and go into battle for your country. If your other values are being violated, whatever those values may be, you say your health is compromised or threatened, well, probably you will be trying to protect your health somehow. But if you are just trying to protect something without emotion, that often wouldn't be as intense. So Mama Bear, for example, doesn't stand up for her cubs dispassionately. She doesn't just say, oh, you bastards who are trying to harass my babies, just go away. No, she goes, I'm going to eat you alive. Now that's anger. She doesn't dwell on it though, because she doesn't create a story about other creatures are threatening her babies, or maybe babies are actually causing themselves harm, who knows. So we learn how to recognize that there is a justifiable response to your values that are being violated or compromised. For example, your health is being compromised by eating some unhealthy foods. You don't have to get angry about it. You just simply stop eating those foods. As a matter of fact, if you do get angry, you will add insult to injury and cause yourself more harm health-wise. However, most people don't just dispassionately say, oh yeah, somebody is invading my country, damn. Well, maybe I'll go shoot them. Most people actually experience some kind of emotional reaction arising in their bodies. And we need to understand which energy centers are associated with these emotional reactions. We test all the different energy centers called chakras. So obviously we work with more energy centers than the 3 dantians that most Qigong practitioners are familiar with. We work with energy centers in the body that are often associated with practice of yoga, known as chakras, or energy centers throughout the whole spinal column, from the root chakra and the perineum to the second chakra, which is also pretty much the same place as the lower dantian, to the third chakra, which is solar plexus, to the fourth chakra, which is the chest area, also known as heart chakra or middle dantian, the throat chakra, the third eye chakra, also often referred to as the upper dantian. And then there is also the 7th chakra, which is outside the physical body. It doesn't manifest as the holding pattern in the physical body. The 7th chakra is actually associated with the state of neutrality or being centered, where all of your energy centers are humming and working in concert together. Now, the 7th chakra obviously is something that also leads to more exalted and enlightened states of consciousness. We explore those once we figure out how to work with all the other energy centers and make them hum and work together in concert. And the 6 holding patterns that we study the primary holding patterns. Of course, there are also plenty of combination of this primary holding patterns, but the main ones are holding forth, holding back, holding up, holding down, holding in, and holding out. Just like in medical terminology, when there are certain directions such as anterior, posterior, superior, inferior, interior, and exterior directions when it comes to the physical body. They also have certain qualities such as association with yin and yang types of energies. They also are associated with certain emotional states. And since I promised that we would work with the emotion of anger today, we'll look at the holding pattern associated with the anger. And it happens to be not only the anger that is associated with this holding pattern. All kinds of other interesting emotional states are mixed together with anger, rely all together on that particular energy center. We test the holding patterns and the energy centers associated with them by applying the least amount of pressure on the body at each of these chakras to find out which of the chakra is weakest when you apply pressure on it as the person is holding that particular holding pattern. So you can actually learn how to enter any of these holding patterns at will. For most people, this is completely unconscious. They're not familiar with holding patterns, not aware of the fact that they're holding some holding patterns, and so they basically experience them completely unconsciously. But if you are familiar with holding patterns and you can exercise them consciously, something really amazing happens. We actually can choose to tap into one energy resource or another associated with these particular holding patterns. The energy resource associated with holding forth pattern is the middle dantian or heart chakra. It has to do with passions of all kinds, whether it's love, compassion, curiosity, desire for something. For example, if you have high priority values, you have certain passion for those. For example, if you have passion, love for your country, let's say. Fine, you're a patriot. Where do you think that love resides in your body? Or where do you think you would find the area where you can be pushed the easiest, the lightest, and be thrown off balance? That's right. It's actually the middle dantian or the heart chakra. Now, what happens as a result of using the heart chakra to engage in the holding pattern associated with anger? It's relatively easy to transition from anger to other types of passion, whether it's curiosity or love or compassion. How do we do this? We realize that anger is associated with particular values, and values are not set in stone. There is also the question of how much it's your authentic value versus how much it's something that has been indoctrinated into your consciousness. Most of the countries, most of the governments of the countries instill it in their citizens' minds as the primary value. So much so that citizens of those countries would die for those countries. Basically, the value of their own health and preservation is lower on their priority list than the value of the love for the country. I'm not going to judge it. I'm just going to make an observation of fact and say, okay, so if that's the case, let's see if it's always a workable way to have your values organized or structured. Because when your values compromise your health and your life sometimes, you may feel like you are a hero in other people's eyes. But you also lose something precious, which is your life or health. Now, for some people, it may not be precious. I don't want to instill the value of health in everyone's minds either. I don't want to indoctrinate you in believing that your health should be a top priority value. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to do something that most people never do in their lives. I invite you to do a little bit of homework. You don't have to do it right now, but maybe 1 or 2 people will be able to receive coaching on this subject matter even today. I invite you to write down the list of your values. Just literally grab a sheet of paper and pencil or pen and start jotting down the values that you uphold in your mind. Some of them may come to you immediately. Some of them may come after a little bit of deliberation. Some of them that show up on top of the list of your values that as you write it down may actually not be the highest priority values. But because you remember them first, they creeped up to the top of the list. Some values that you remembered later and they ended up closer to the bottom of the list may actually be higher priority values for you. So what you're going to do? Well, you are going to reorganize your list of values. You are going to restructure the values in your list according to their level of priority. And guess what's going to happen? You may start recognizing, as you start thinking about these values, you start contemplating about them, maybe even remembering certain times when you acquired those values. In most cases, you didn't get born with the values. You actually received them during their bringing, during your years of education or indoctrination. You basically received these values from other people, from the media, from religion, and society in general. These values may not even be your authentic values. If you really think about some of them, you may realize that they don't serve you that well and deserve to be demoted to the bottom of the list or completely removed from your list of values because you no longer believe in them. It's just they popped up because you were indoctrinated to believe that those are important values. Guess what? Without going through this process of reevaluating your values, you might even give your life for some value that actually is not your high priority in reality. If you do that, you may be considered a hero, but you actually might have given your life, or maybe some other, made another compromise because you were indoctrinated to believe in a value that actually wasn't an authentic value for you. So a lot of things that we do are not because we think through and decide, yeah, this is really an authentic value for me and I'm going to pursue it and I'm going to uphold it by any means possible. Instead, our friends, our relatives, our neighbors, our media, fake news, whatever influences us, we soak it in unbeknownst to ourselves, acquiring certain values or enforcing the values that were already instilled in our minds. And when these values get reinforced, they become more and more ingrained as pretending to be the high priority values. That will screw you up if you act upon them because they're not your authentic values. And what happens to many people's, in many people's lives is that the anger that they experience happens as a result of certain values that get compromised, that triggered that emotional reaction, that weren't really high priority values. If the angry person had a chance to really contemplate, was it worth it to get angry about this thing or that thing? Often, not 100% of times, of course, but quite often they will say, you know, it wasn't really worth it. I just got reactive. Well, that's somebody's responsibility, right? Whose responsibility is it if people get reactive. It's people's responsibility. We cannot point a finger at somebody else and say, he made me reactive or she made me reactive. We do it to ourselves, just like our tension. It's not somebody is pain in my neck. It's my responsibility because nobody does tension to me. I create tension in my own neck. I'm pain in my own neck. Now, what does it mean? It means that I actually have to take responsibility for my reactions, for the way that I make choices in my life, for my state of health, my emotional state, and everything else that I experience in my life. Now that is a pretty amazing state of consciousness in itself, the state of being responsible for yourself. If you don't relegate responsibility to others, if you actually take full responsibility for yourself, guess what it makes you? It makes you empowered because you realize that you are at cause of your own experiences. Nobody's doing it to you. You are in charge of your own destiny. Now, what does it feel like to be empowered and to be in charge of your own destiny? Sounds like a rhetorical question, right? It feels awesome. It feels pretty freaking amazing because you realize that you're captain of your own ship. But with that also comes some degree of worries and concerns that responsibility goes hand in hand with. We will look at worries and concerns in our future coaching sessions and coaching clinics. But I hope in today's clinic, I address any questions that you have. Oh, I see there is a question. A lot of things that make my friends angry make me sad. I have a hard time accessing anger, much easier to access sadness. This feels really imbalanced. Any thoughts on this? Well, absolutely. Thanks, Anne, for asking this question. Yes, I have certain thoughts on this. First of all, the way we react to stimuli, whatever stimuli life throws our way, has a lot to do with our predisposition. In other words, if you're predisposed to sadness, it's more likely that you will experience exactly that emotion when you feel like something challenges your values. Some people cry, some people feel depressed, some people just experience temporary sadness. When does that happen? It happens when a different energy center is constantly running, constantly producing the energy charge that you rely on. And I don't know you, but I would imagine that you have a particular holding pattern that is a little bit like this. And this holding pattern is called holding down. There's tension in the abs. There is certain roundedness to the shoulders, they're kind of slouched. And the head is kind of hanging low a little bit. That is a holding pattern associated with a different energy center, solar plexus chakra. It actually is the energy that goes hand in hand with sadness, depression, or similar feelings, sometimes grief, sometimes remorse. Basically, we experience this type of emotions because we are already running that energy through our system. And when something triggers that emotional reaction, it's easy to default to it because we are already operating on that frequency, so to speak. That's obviously one of several options. Some people, when exact same thing would happen to them, would have a different attitude. For example, some would get really judgmental and perhaps aloof. Oh, this is really wrong. This is really bad. That's not how it should be. It's neither sadness nor anger. It's a judgmental attitude or judgmental emotional state that's associated with a different energy center. I don't have to explain all the different energy centers today, but basically that's how we operate. We default to those states that we are habituated to experience. Our habituation basically is repeated over and over again through a series of life events. The more of these live events happen in our lives that reinforce that pattern, the more likely we will default to it. It's basically neurology. It's the neural pathways in our brains are used over and over again, and the more a particular neural pathway is being used, the more those synapses get trained to conduct electric charges. The more they're trained to conduct electric charges and basically become really connected well with the synapses going further down that particular neural pathway, the more likely that the electric charge will follow that particular course of action. And that basically is kind of a scientific way to explain the same thing that I was just explaining from point of view of energy centers. In other words, we have our predilections. Do we have to be stuck in those predilections? No. Just like with the values, we can reevaluate our predilections and we can choose to be different. Being different is a big challenge because it requires changing your identity. What does it mean? Well, it means that when you are in a particular state of consciousness and you feel like yourself, it's easy to act in a way that is habitual to you because you feel like yourself and there is nothing wrong with this way of being because you're just used to it. If you're acting out of your character, so to speak, you may not feel like yourself. For example, if somebody triggers your anger and you actually get angry, you will feel like, oh, that's not me. I'm usually feeling sad. How did that happen? Well, it's because you have a different energy center that can get activated. It just doesn't have the habit of being active. What is healthier, to operate on the energy center of sadness or energy center of anger or energy center of judgment? Neither one of them. The healthiest one is, of course, to be fluid and flexible so that you can respond most appropriately to each and every stimulus that life throws your way. In other words, not every time it's appropriate to get sad, but sometimes it is. It's not appropriate to get angry every time something triggers you, but on some occasions it may be. It's not always appropriate to get judgmental, but again, on some occasions it actually is appropriate. So we learn how to recognize when it is appropriate to exhibit certain emotional response, and we do this consciously. That's why I call it response as opposed to a reaction. You see, we actually become conscious of how we respond to the various events in our lives. And as we do this with self-awareness, then we can handle on our emotional states, on our energy resources, and we can tap different energy resources at will. What does it make you? It makes you more resourceful. It actually gives you a much broader way of dealing with situations because you're not just treating everything in the exact same way. Whatever happens, you start crying. Now, I'm not assuming that you start crying, but that would be kind of like an exaggerated demonstration of a one and the same reaction to all kinds of different events. Well, it's just like some people, whatever happens, they go angry. Have you met anyone like that? So it's not a healthy way to be. But we learn how to develop a broader variety of tools. We actually start using these energies as energetic tools, power tools, if you will. And we develop a broad spectrum of tools, or a palette of different colors, if you will. They say if the only tool you have is a hammer, you treat everything as a nail. Well, if the only tool you have is a gun, you treat everything as a target. If the only tool you have are tears, then you burst into tears every time something triggers you. If the only tool is, for example, argument, well, you'll be arguing with everything and everyone. Have you met anyone who is very argumentative? No matter what you tell them, no matter what happens, they argue. Some of you nod your heads. Great. So what happens is that these are just stereotypical patterns of behavior that people get stuck in. Getting stuck in a perspective is not a healthy way to be. It may be a beautiful perspective. For example, you can say, everything's good. It's all good, and we can just kick back and watch what's going to happen next, and it's all good. Well, it's a perspective. I don't want to say it's the healthiest perspective, but it's one of the perspectives that people may have. Now, what if you don't get stuck in that perspective? You actually will be able to expand beyond that energy center and tap into other energy resources in your life that would be associated with different perspectives. Just like Stefan mentioned, the idea of looking at the same situation from other people's points of view, that basically gives us an opportunity to see things from a variety of different vantage points. And what does it give you? It gives you the three-dimensional view of reality, or maybe even more than three-dimensional. Basically, we develop the ability to expand our perspectives and see things from a variety of different vantage points. When we have that ability, we can understand people better. We don't get angry when people have something to say that's different from our opinion. We actually respect their opinion because, well, they have their own perspective. It's not like that's right or wrong. It's just simply a different way of looking at things. Now, if you used to be judgmental, you may still try to cast that kind of label, or something is right and something is wrong, but at least you will have other options. You will not have to constantly consider something bad and something good. You may actually be able to expand beyond that. Just like we learn how to expand beyond any limited perspective. We start looking at things in a much more relativistic way, where there is nothing clearly good or clearly bad. Instead of black and white way of looking at things, we look at things in a much more multicolored way. When we do that, we actually experience fullness of life. And who wouldn't want that? Any questions or comments? Anyone would like to occupy the hot seat and receive a little bit of coaching in regard to exploration of anger or anything else? These moments of emotion stop, then following the Tao, peacefulness arrives in the timeliness of your action. Therefore, you are again following the Tao. The definition of peaceful movement is in a timeliness accord of the Tao. Yeah, that's what we study as harmonious culture movement. So we don't just learn how to stop when our buttons get pushed and try to harmonize ourselves. We actually develop a culture of movement that we call harmonious culture movement. Why? Because you are the way you move. If you move in a disharmonious, jerky, start-stop, unbalanced way, you actually are going to experience life from that vantage point. And so you will have to stop yourself a lot and try to restore peacefulness. But if you move in a harmonious manner, the peacefulness is your way of being. And so you are operating in the flow all the time, or much more than just once in a blue moon. And also what happens is that when we develop harmonious culture movement, we become more efficient. When we operate in the flow of things, Tao, we don't struggle against the flow of things. The holding patterns, for example, as I was demonstrating, let's say holding forth. It's like I'm struggling against this imbalance where my physical body is not occupying the center of my own energy field. And so that creates obvious restriction and range of motion, inflexibility, tension. That's why we call it holding pattern of holding tension. And so basically these holding patterns are like somatic manifestations of certain unconscious strategies for struggling against the flow. Let me repeat that again. It's a pretty important transmission. Holding patterns are somatic manifestations of unconscious strategies that we have for struggling against the flow. Why in hell would we have these kind of strategies? Well, we didn't choose to develop these strategies. We accepted them as part of indoctrination. We basically ended up with these unconscious strategies as we were growing up and learning from others. Often others did not serve as role models of what it's like to be in the flow. And so we ended up developing the strategies of how to be not in the flow. Well, there is nothing glorious about it, but that's what we often end up with. And we learn how to restore our balance by discovering that the strategies are not good or not bad. These strategies are just one of the ways to look at things. Basically, each strategy represents a particular perspective, and it comes with a certain set of values. If you work with your values, and that's going to be your homework that I suggest to do after our session today. If you work on a list of your values and literally reprioritize and reevaluate your values, something really amazing is going to happen. You will discover that some of those values are of higher priority than you thought, and you bring them to the top of the list of your priorities. Some values may no longer belong to your list of values because you literally choose not to hold on to them anymore. And as you release some of the old values and reprioritize others, you will find yourself developing a new way of looking at things, a new way of being, and a new identity based on it. A new identity is something challenging to jump right into because you won't feel like yourself. How do we do it? We do it by developing new habits. As you develop new habits, they will come together to form your new character, your new identity. And as you solidify a more updated identity, that will lead to creating a new destiny. So basically, that's how we become in charge of our destinies, by taking small baby steps, working with our habits. What kind of habits are we talking about? Today we're talking about the habit of anger or similar emotional states associated with that particular energy center, the middle dantian or heart chakra. Some people say, I just want to be in my heart. I just want to operate from this energy center all the time. Well, guess what? It's like having a 6-cylinder engine in your car and running on 1 cylinder only. That's not the way to use your engine, right? Basically, that's a dysfunctional way to use your energy centers. And guess what? This energy center can be associated with anger. And so no wonder that sometimes people who think that they are all loving and compassionate actually flip into anger so easily. Why? Because it's the same energy. It's just different manifestation of it. Mr. Spock said, move into stillness. Attention to the microcosmic orbit of chi within our bodies helps to focus and release. So the fact that there is no stillness, there is no life without movement. If there is life force flowing somewhere in your body, that's movement by definition. There is no stillness. Now, you can experience moments of stillness within the movement when you are in the flow. moving, and stillness is relative. So once we see that, we realize that nothing is permanent. The fact of impermanence is something that allows us to get over the idea of stillness and develop the ability to be in the flow. You cannot be in the flow if you don't pay attention to the flow. How do you pay attention to the flow? You start honing these skills that we work in our Qigong coaching program. The skills and the habits of paying attention beyond the scope of attention that most people develop in their daily lives. We develop the quality of attention that most people never experience in their lives. We develop the ability to pay attention to the flow of qi in our bodies and around in such a way that it allows us to actually learn to trust that this flow knows where to flow. For example, microcosmic orbit. What's one of the ways that energy may flow in your body? Does it always have to flow that way? No, it's just one of many patterns of energy circulation. What if the energy doesn't flow this way? Should you force it to go along this microcosmic orbit pattern? For folks not familiar with it, it's basically the circulation of energy around the lower dantian. No, you don't have to. Energy knows where to flow. Who knows better than energy itself where it should flow? It flows according to laws of nature. How many of these laws do we know? Well, we know a few, but there are a lot more than we don't know. Would you agree with my assertion that what we know about ourselves, about nature at large, about the world in general, is just the tip of the iceberg, is compared to what we don't know? If you agree with that assertion, then you understand that energy flows according to many laws that we don't understand, don't know about, and may not even agree with if we learn about them. Well, guess what? The nature doesn't require your agreement. It will function with or without your agreement, and your job is to learn how to be in the flow of things in alignment and in harmony with the Tao. If you do so, you experience the oneness with the universe, and you stop struggling and suffering and causing other people struggling and suffering. If you struggle and suffer, that usually means that you are not in alignment with the flow of things in the universe. You have some unconscious strategy running in the back of your mind that puts you against the flow or enforces certain actions that are not in accord with the flow of things. When that happens, it basically leads to discomfort, pain, and suffering. The question, somebody, Marsha says, the challenge is to have all these tools at your accessing in the moment. Anger is running the show. Well, yes, that's exactly the challenge. And your mission, should you choose to accept it. If you take that challenge, if you accept this mission, then you know already that there are some tools available. There are some ways to function other than just flip into anger. And you have freedom of choice. And by and large, people who experience greater freedom of choice are capable of experiencing greater happiness. So this is a no-nonsense, very straightforward way to actually produce or experience more happiness. We also have a really cool meditation practice specifically dedicated to that. We'll be exploring that in our Qigong coaching program. Speaking of which, I wanted to invite you to join our Qigong coaching program. This is something that I am passionate about. I would love to share it with you and also encourage you to experience more of my work. What we covered today is just a fragment of what we study and practice. And one of the things that you will discover for yourself, not only that you will get access to this coaching program, but you will also get access to several other amazing online courses, such as Harmonious Strength Training course that I will provide to you at no extra charge. You literally will discover how to become a lot stronger without bulking up like a bodybuilder, and also how to release undue tensions in your body, which obviously are not a healthy thing to have. They lead to all kinds of energy blockages and just limitations in range of motion and flexibility. Plus, you will also get access to another online course. I mentioned fundamentals today. That's actually the course that will walk you through the exploration of several most fundamental applications of energy arts, such as standing. How do you stand? Well, there are many ways people say they should stand, but shoulds are not always correct. What we do is we test everything. We don't just assume that something is right and something is wrong. We actually test it. And by doing so, we discover something that works and discard things that don't work. That's basically an intelligent, evidence-based approach to practice of Qigong. I want to invite you to explore this because this is going to transform the quality of your life and potentially the life of people around you. And I want to thank you once again. Have a wonderful weekend. I will look forward to seeing you next Saturday